5 bedrooms now debris, then guns washed ashore after a suicide. But I still don't want to be here. This week, you found out it cost $2,000 to take down a tree. The wind pushed so hard that even the stop signs shook their heads. Even though we're a state away from reaching the ocean, water laps against the windows at night. A wren caught himself in our screen door in the early morning, his claws fingernail-like. I thought someone was breaking in. When I was a kid, we used to clip my parakeet's nails. I accidentally cut them to the quick. We'd let her fly and hit the ceiling, bathe her in the sink. A girl up the road would put her cat in a pillowcase and swing it around. She'd howl and the cat would dart out in a zigzag after. Since winter, we can see the river sparkle from our bedroom. No curtains on the windows, no leaves on the trees. The church dome on the hill peeks out too. I'm so tired of the pattern of snow, then rain. Irony after irony, your suffering, then mine, handed back and forth. Someday we'll say there was a time when we were all in love with our little family, when the dog was still alive, when my hair had its color, when the baby couldn't say words yet, when we wouldn't have traded it for anything but sleep, when we didn't worry about the windows, their mouths agape. We've had sex in 5 of the 8 rooms. Tonight, a group of people scratched the front door to see if this was a halfway house. We found antidepressants with someone else's name when we moved in. You said you might buy a gun and not tell me so we wouldn't hurt ourselves. I told my family not to give me one. I joked I'd blow my own head off. We once saw a young girl wheel a propane tank down the street back home. How stupid we were, thinking she wanted to light a grill, have a cookout. By the final year we lived there, makeshift kitchens popped up in other people's crawl spaces. The sea underground made the limestone here. And this poem is called Environment, and sort of in the same zone as the last piece, a little bit shorter, and a little bit more specific about the experiences of trying to start a family and maybe not being completely successful with that at first. Environment. The house is rotten, lousy with bugs. Yesterday, springtails in the shower. This morning, a hum. In the bedroom window, a wasp nest. I didn't even notice until I overheard someone next door stuffing our bin with other people's trash. The lid won't close now, so when the garbage truck finally brakes and squeaks down the street, I peek out and then into the comb's busy whir. Several dozen paper cells, little prisms packed with eggs. I read in the newsfeed the only way we can save the planet is to stop making more people. After that, we could stop our travel, stop our tracks. I should be proud every month when I see blood. Right after I lost my pregnancy, I was told it was probably for the best because the baby might not have come out right. A week or so back, we saw a hornet's nest the size of a turkey in a tree. I thought it was an owl at first. When I was a kid, my dad cut down a 2-foot-tall swelling, dropped it in a black pillowcase, shellacked, and hung the whole thing in a glass box that the Kmart threw away. He took the display up to the school for everybody to see. These days, he reminds me how good I got it, hurries me to have children before it's too late. The wasp in our window fashioned their own paper from wood and spit glue. By autumn, they'll all die mostly anyhow. In the spring, the few queens left will begin again. Etymology of gun. Someone handed me a gun and I hid it in a closet. A millennium ago, a cannon was made to fit in a fist. Bamboo packed with powder in a hunt for immortality. And then, in our time, a man from a country godless and cold that gave this easy weapon a name shot more people than anyone on earth. The word gun means war, not survival, is rooted in a feminine name that repeats, War, war, like an echo, a ringing in the air. In the armed forces, soldiers are told to name their rifles, to love them, own them. The worst shooting in America for 16 years was at the Lubies in Killeen, Texas. He hated women. One of his victims wanted more guns after he felled both her parents and failed to end her. Man has always found a way to kill himself, turn a weed flower into a gun instead of a crown. My mother first lived in a shotgun house, all the bedrooms on one side of the building, safely tucked away. The story was you could get a clean line from one end to the other, front door to back, a bullet entering the home without obstacle. And I think this next poem is apparent in its title what it means, but I'll explain anyhow. That my dad is a storyteller and he loves to tell stories. He loves to tell anecdotes. And I think any kid could attest to hearing some of the same stories repeated from their parents. And this particular story I had heard a number of times when I was a kid. And so this is sort of about the story he tells, but also the fact that he keeps telling it again and again. My father tells the story of seeing Tanya Tucker dancing on a bar again. At a hotel lounge in Western Kentucky, she sang Delta Dawn. He always says it like she was a wild woman. It was the 80s, her time, his too. He'd come home in the middle of the night from a 5-day stretch coupling trains, take us up to the corner diner while I was still in my nightgown. He used to tell that story like a warning. The same way I couldn't wear lipstick, hook my overalls on with purely one strap, string my plastic rosary as a necklace. Now it's just a joke. I imagine her boots, leather pants, tight shirt holding a bikini top you could only see if you cracked open the record's centerfold. Delta wasn't even her song, it turns out, but hers is the version everyone remembers. She was so young when they put the track down, she didn't know what a cappella meant. The story of man and the Last Judgment staining the walls. And there she was, in the timeout bar. No band had her back once more, heels on the countertop, pedestaled, reaching for the rafters, working the cheap seats with all she had. Before Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, he blotted out the fake sky and its stars. This poem I'm going to share today because BOA was so lovely and they shared it on Instagram today. So I will read this one as well. In Vivo Paradox. Cat in a box. As of right now, the night before my ultrasound, he is both alive and late. A glass brimming with poison could spill at any moment and I'd never know. I was pulled from a scar on my mother's belly. Before me, there was another possible child. The rabbit is always dead, whether her egg stores swell with women's signals or stay unbothered. My mother tells me now she's sure I ate squirrels at some point. My father dispatched them in the early morning hours in an even more rural past. In a dresser drawer, I kept a worn rabbit's foot. I imagined somewhere ruby eyes that scared me. I wished for a different life, not knowing what it would be. And because right now I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, I'll share this one about swimming in the ocean. Luster. We baptized ourselves in the Atlantic 3 weeks after your mother died. After days on end of cheap beer, we dared each other to skinny dip. The night sky so dark we fell into every depression in the sand. You told me you'd never marry. Then we had sex on the hard silt. I could scrape my teeth across your shoulder and know you were the real deal. Other boys were fool's gold. Nuggets of grit embedded in my back. The dog puked on my party skirt with the metallic embellishments on the drive home. We pissed off our host, out laughing them, out coupling them. a pillow wedged behind the headboard, pulling my dress down on the front porch. Our own bedroom, ceilings drywall buckles and sparkles with pyrite. The shingles fiberglass worn by moonglow. These days, I'd kill for a private beach like that one, even though it was never ours to begin with. Ghost crabs haunting us just under the surface of sunlit glitter. Just a few more. This is the 20 gauge is meant for birds and beginners. In our house, the birthday banner we use and reuse all the special days has fallen off the wall. Tape failing on one side and stuck too high to remove on the other. A song gums inside my head. I saw pictures of Kurt Cobain's waist and feet, a cop holding his rifle. I had always envisioned a handgun, imagined an empty room, but not a greenhouse. The Christmas of 7th grade, they were on TV all the time. Lily's around. Neil Young said he sounded like a werewolf. Then that spring, kids at school made easy jokes about his last name, Cobain. Each boy had their records. The naked baby baited with money, someone's insides on the outside. Everyone lays claim, an echo chamber. His widow says one song is about her vagina. In Bloom might be the guy who gave him the gun. And the footage of them holding their infant on heroin. I'm past his age. My baby's past his baby's age. My marriage past his marriage's age. I don't even like his music that much. The question mark butterfly. While we blew bubbles that shine oil and water like carnival glass, we caught glimpse of what looked to be a moth, a fake, an impersonator for sure. With its wings closed, it posed as tree bark. And then a blink opened orange and black. Not quite a monarch stained glass, the white rind of zest pith turned on its ear. This pattern gently speckled. The baby wanted to poke him with a stick. I said, that will break him. I said, he's like paper. History is recorded like the memory of a small child. Nothing at conception or even birth, then one awful something at 2, a tiny trauma, mother and the others leaving for Tennessee, my wet hands pounding the screen door, grandfather yelling, shut up. Then nothing for years more, until events squeeze tighter together into a timeline. I worry what the baby will recall first about the world. I know now what we saw wasn't a moth, that he wanted the nectarine I cut first for the dog, then left for the birds. He might have been drawn to something else entirely, carrion, what was once sweet, but at present rotting. Prophecy. This begins with an epigraph from Isaiah. And really, this is prophesy, because this is the verb version of that word. Desert animals will move into the ruined city, and the houses will be haunted by howling creatures. Owls will live among the ruins, and wild goats will go there to dance. 3 nights in a row, we watched a bird of prey watch us. He was silent and cut our path twice. The 3rd time, we thought we had missed him. But on our last turn, there he was, perched on an old metal handrail. Slow pivot to make a near perfect circle of a stare. I tried not to move. I took in his face to note its shape. The lack of heart, a true owl. An omen, we joked. Maybe death, maybe fertility. When we got home, I read Isaiah backwards. What is it that empties each bedroom and fills it with beast? What angered the Almighty at that hour? Once oxygen was present in the world, animals could commence. In Genesis, God gifts Adam with a showing of animals, here in the air, there breathing in swallowed water, heavy on the ground. At twilight, we teased and scared each other. He's right behind you, one of us would cry out. I wanted to rush the end before it arrived, jump the gun to call the big surprise. And I think I'm just going to read 3 more. 2 are short, and 1 is just about a page and a half. So thank you for spending some time with me. The mass shooter of the day lived on my childhood street. Just 2 turns, a left and a right. The name changes, but the path from door to door moves like a snake. He was born in a state just to the north, went to the school in a state just to the south. He killed 5 people, almost 6, 4 blocks away from where my grandmother died, well into her 90s. 2 blocks east, my brother started thinking he should take a gun to work, the threat of violence following him from his car to the lobby of his building. The city's fire hydrants the same color as orange hunting caps. I trick-or-treated at his house before he ever thought of living there, before he was born. His next-door neighbor, a little girl 2 grades down, now all grown up, microphone in her face on the 6 o'clock news, laughing nervously, saying, "We thought he was square, that we were the loud ones around here." Mental illness, she guessed. In the tiny town we live in at the moment, a little boy with a BB gun practiced setting his sights on us while we walked with our baby and dog at the park. He'd march a few steps, stop, and aim his rifle in our direction. My family promises to teach my child to one day shoot a gun. And just 2 more. Jeremiah. This also begins with an epigraph from Isaiah. Woe unto them that join house to house, that lay field to field, till there be no place, that they may be placed alone in the midst of the earth. My husband has already started packing our things. I spent the day yelling shut up behind a closed front door to the street like a coward. I slept late into the afternoon, dreamt of strolling into houses that were taken, a whole town of bungalows for us to spy on. We really did that once, walked into the wrong house looking for a friend in the suburbs. The occupant didn't see or hear us and kept chopping vegetables, back turned. We could have been stabbed. What did the 2 of us know about order? His 2-story childhood farmhouse caving in, billboards, apartments, duplexes leaning on the eaves. The home I grew up in protected by chain link fences. My father could name everyone around us, the only place he's ever known. The police, the promise of violence, our car kicked in, the racing stripes down our Ford Escort never straight again. For the 3rd time in a matter of months, a gun's gone off while my husband was at work. 2 drive-bys, 1 accidental discharge. We hit the floor of our living room when across the way a do-nothing fired his pistol into the sky. These days, on either side, single men that look like serial killers. A half a block away, a man knifed to death. In the hours that followed, the neighbors picked through his belongings, thanked God for the new dining room table left by the curb. We saw another man beat the shit out of his girlfriend on the front porch, push her down, knock her teeth out, her mouth bloody and weeping a shroud bib on her Easter dress. On Mother's Day, someone next door ate our trash. I came from a state with nothing but caves underground, fault lines, rivers, and lakes. There is nowhere to go, nowhere to turn back toward. The lone person nearby we talked to, we've called the cops on several times. Daddy once threatened to shoot our neighbor. Last night, we heard an alley cat scream on our porch, said it must be mating season again, but woke this morning to a snake with 1 pierced hole straight through his head. The same one scooted off to the bushes the day before. My father hired 3 ex-cons to build a fence along his back lot, concrete, metal, 2 men high. And this is the final poem, hopefully a little bit more optimistic than the last few that I've read. And it is called Epiphany. Thank you so much for joining. My baby wants to turn me into a bird. He points to my nose and then his toy owl and says, beak, beak. I make my arms into wings. Fly, he says, and signals upward. He watches me sing. I sing only for him. I have a body of air, glide and lift. See my hands disappear, my skin sprout downy feathers. Soon I will pluck feathers with this nose mouth from my own breast to build us a nest. At first, when he called me mama, he struck my chest. I thought he was looking for milk, but it was the rib cage inside he named, a sternum, an axis that would permit me to wheel and rise. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that reading, Jenny. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Great.
All right, great. Congratulations on the release of your book. We're all very excited about it, and it's great to talk to you and to hear you read the poems, which I've read a million times, but never in your voice. So that's really cool. So I just have a few questions for you. We're going to keep it a little bit shorter, and I'm hoping when we wrap it up, if you'd be willing to read one more poem to take us out, that would be awesome. But my first question is about the title of the collection. Somebody asked me the other day, are titles important? And I mean, especially with a poetry collection, every single word associated with a collection is really important. So I'm curious for you, what you would like Jump the Gun to communicate to a potential reader about the collection.
Yes. Well, I had actually gone through some other titles before Jump the Gun, as I'm sure a lot of folks do when they're working on a collection. And one title I remember hanging on to for a while was Armed to the Teeth. And I originally had that as a line in a poem, and I didn't end up including that poem, I don't think. And it felt too violent to me, even though a lot of the poems in the collection are very violent and kind of try to tackle violence. This title felt more like it could lean in different directions. So much of the book is not just about violence, but about anxiety in many different forms. So anxiety about motherhood in the current culture that we're living in, and just general anxiety about being a human being right now in the United States. So in a way, it felt light because of its. This title actually shows up in Prophesy that I read. And in that context, it feels kind of silly. But really, the reason that I picked this one is that I'm a very anxious person, and it felt like it just fit the tone of everything that I was putting together most.
Yeah,
And it's a full sentence too. I like that. It's a
yeah.
command.
I think and you held up the book earlier, and I have one here, but it never comes through well when I hold it up. But I think the cover art balances the title well too, because it could be just overt, like a picture of a gun or an AK-47 or something like that, but it keeps it sort of more ambiguous, and I really like that about it. That said, of course, literal gun do make appearances throughout the collection. Etymology of a gun is one of those, and that's one of my favorite poems. And I love the line, "A millennium ago, a cannon was made to fit into a fist." I love that you say not a hand, but you say a fist, which is a great detail. That would be the normal thing, it would fit into a hand, but you say fist. It also starts with a really intriguing line, which is, "Someone handed me a gun and I hid it in the closet." And as
Mhm.
soon as I read that line, I think, oh, we're going into sort of a confessional,
Mhm.
poem territory. And then you make this really cool pivot, and it becomes more of anything, kind of like a mini history of firearms and guns specifically. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the origins of this poem and how it developed, and maybe it's
Um,
a larger collection too, because I think it's a really pivotal poem in the collection.
Thank you. Yes, the opening line really was a thing that happened, that I'm not going to get into the specifics of who, but someone that I know well wanted me to be protected. And so they wanted me to have a gun as I was traveling. And I was not comfortable with that. And so that kind of was the, jumping off place for that piece. And I really throughout that poem was trying to think of all of the different ways that I could personalize it, because I also close with my mother growing up in a shotgun house. And really that, I don't even think that's the appropriate etymology for that word. I think the word shotgun comes from another language. So it might be like shogun. And that's why that house is called that. But when I was a child, my mom used to say all the time, I grew up in a shotgun house. I grew up in a shotgun house. And the reason she told me is that all of the bedrooms and everything were kind of located on one side of the house. And so I kept thinking about that like you could get a clear shot through a structure without hitting anything. And then that sort of made me think about how much gun violence has kind of entered all of our homes, even if we don't know someone directly. We see it on the news. It seems like more than ever. And I don't know the statistics, so I'm not going to quote anything. But it feels like I graduated high school in 1999, and that was the year of the Columbine shooting, which was sort of, it seems like the beginning of this entire era. And so I think that also, all of those little details were in there. I ended up not using every single detail that was in my head for that piece. So yeah, it kind of just became something where I was pulling little pieces of research, and I was like, well, this sort of folds into this and this and this and this, and how can I take it from starting with myself and roll it back to ending with something personal too. Because that's what this stuff feels like. It's a public problem, but it's also incredibly personal too.
I think that's a great way to put it, and that comes through really strongly. And along with guns, there's these throughout the collection. There's these ominous flashes, and I would call them implied violence, and it's sort of looming just outside the frame a lot. We see it right off the bat when you're discussing a neighborhood that you lived in, and it's not necessarily, it's not a graphic depiction of violence, but as the reader, you get the sense like it's kind of looming right out there. So I'm curious about the role of violence or implied violence in teasing out larger themes of the collection as well.
I didn't read this poem, but the very first poem in the collection is actually called Sex and Violence, which is the very first one here. And one of the reasons that I wanted to start with that one is because I feel like it's kind of a trope, right? Like that's the thing that people want to read that and watch that, right? Like they want movies and TV shows and books to be filled with things that are gritty, and in a way it grabs us, and at the same time we don't want any part of it. And so I appreciate you saying like there's flashes of that, because I felt like there were times in the book where I was trying to kind of just show it like it's always back in a back drawer somewhere. So even if it's not in the forefront of a poem, you're thinking about gun violence or violence in general. And that particular poem, Jeremiah, that you mentioned, it really does toward the end become incredibly violent for me, because I remember seeing some of those things happen, like the conflict between two of my neighbors, and being unsure of what to do until it escalated to a point of violence where we had to call someone. And so I think for a lot of these pieces, I have that anxiety writing them, and I'm not sure like how many details I should show in it, because I don't want to turn off the reader or be too pessimistic throughout. That's my nature, I think, is to be cynical and a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't even know if I call it cynicism, but there is, again, it's almost that specter, there's something in the air. And it was interesting because the other thing that I really hit on with the collection and what it resonated with me is the allusions to God and religion. And a lot of times, those may appear in poems almost in a sort of sense of relief. But in this case, I'm looking at a poem like The Mirror of God is Only Glass, and you have the line, Mary, the mirror for us all, break its glass and bury it deep. And then on the very next page, you have Litany, which starts with Christ on the cross, which is obviously like the most violent scene in Christ's life. So there's also a really thin line between religion and violence throughout this. And I'd love to hear maybe a little bit about religion and your work.
Thank you. Yes, I probably evident from those couple of pieces. I was brought up Catholic, and Catholicism is a beautiful and ornate religion, and it is also extremely violent in some of its imagery, and also in some of its practice too. I mean, I don't want to throw the word around too much, but it's definitely a religion that likes to kind of put people in their places. And so I think the little glimpses of that you see in the poem, that really is just that was the bank of experiences that I had growing up. I was an altar server when I was a kid, um, and the breaking of the glass and burying it, that's actually like a religious practice, and the burying a statue underground for good luck is a religious practice. So they're very kind of odd things that people don't talk about as much because they sound kind of cultish, but they're completely real. I am very much a person that believes in a higher power, but is a doubter about a lot of things. And um, so I think that probably shows up a little bit. Like I don't know how to articulate some of the beliefs that I have. And I question a lot of stuff. So I don't know.
It's definitely a pillar, of the collection. That was a recurring pillar, and another recurring pillar is the environment. And it really often specifically connected to geographical locales too. So it's not necessarily environment, sort of like a capital E. Um, and I'm thinking like insects and violence, you say, is climate, and it starts within months of us leaving the Carolinas, a house on the banks fell into the sea. And then we have a few poems later in Marigolds, the line, marigolds are light turning, they cry. And so, again, there's this sense of like even nature itself is there, and there's this sort of majesty of it. But at any given moment, that could flip over. And maybe we get back to the implied violence of that too, in a way. So how do you feel, how does nature play into your work?
Um, I, well, I mean, this is probably a thing that I think 90% of folks that I know that write poetry could attest to. Love of birds and animals. And so that's kind of a minor obsession of mine. But I think I also kind of interpret a lot of things that happen as, and I mentioned this in one of my poems in a previous book. I don't know if it's the Catholic upbringing or what, but like seeing things as signs. So, uh, if we just left North Carolina and within days a house is crumbling that I'm reading about on the news, that for me feels like the universe just handed me a metaphor, right? Like that was made just for me. Like I tend to interpret things like that very selfishly. That news story, not only did it happen to that person, but because I read it and I'm experiencing something along those lines, I feel like that was something that was gifted and just handed to me. And with that poem, I really did try similarly to etymology of gun, to start with something very personal and end with something very personal and kind of loop them together. Because I start with the ocean, which I miss very much, not living in North Carolina full time. And I end with the stone and the rock of Kentucky, which was made by water, but Kentucky is very much a landlocked state. And so it's kind of devoid of the things that I find so beautiful on the coast. I'm rambling a little bit, I think.
No, 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 that's great. And I mean, and so, I mean, the thing that interests me as I was going through and really pulling apart these different aspects of the book is that, there is a sense of darkness. There is that sense of implied violence. And I think anxiety might be, a great word that sort of hangs over it too. And but do you feel that there's also hope in the collection, or is it almost like I'm reporting from the end here, and this is sort of the way it is? And that's a real genuine question that I have for you as far as like, what we might take away from the book in your perspective.
Right. I'm in North Carolina right now visiting, kind of sharing the book, and then also visiting with folks that I used to work with and are friends with. And I ran into a couple of colleagues at a college that I taught at for a long time. And this was yesterday. And one of them said, it just feels like everything is so disconnected. Like,
Mm.
and both of us kind of remarked that even if we feel joy about something, it's like in the back of your mind, you have 15 other things that you feel like are going to rain on your parade. um, and so you might have a little glimmer of hope, but it always feels like it's being like smoted a little bit, like something's being laid on top of that light. And I'm not saying that that's a good feeling that comes through in these pieces, but it really is. I'm trying to be honest in it, and I feel like before I had children too, um, there were a lot of I was being sold a lot of things on on the experience. And there's so many truths to that experience that I knew nothing about. And the impending doom and fear that comes with having children. I don't think I ever heard anybody say it to me in the same way that I feel it. Um, so I have a few poems in here where I talk about my son, especially toward the end of the book, that I feel are incredibly joyful and delightful. They were great experiences for me, but I always kind of want to like um, deliver them as though another shoe could drop, because there's a nervousness that comes with you could feel happy with your child today, and because we're living in such a chaotic world, we don't know what's coming tomorrow. So I want to appreciate the good things, but I also want to be like vigilant at the same time.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I think it's a very honest, real collection, and I think that it does reflect in all those ways, whether it be religion, the environment, weapons, and the sort of looming sense of violence. Unfortunately, I think it's a beautiful and accurate reflection of the times we're living in. So, thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for allowing BOA to publish it. I think it's a fantastic collection. I hope everybody picks up Jump the Gun. And if you would be willing to share one more poem with us before we sign off, I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to sign off myself and give you the stage. Thanks so much for speaking to me, Jenny.
So much, Peter.
Bye.
Okay, so I have one more piece. And this is called Algorithm. It is a little bit, hopefully a little bit lighter in context. Some of the content, maybe not, but the context of the poem. Um, I think most of us would be familiar with this now, that maybe we look something up on our computer or on our phone, and all of a sudden the computer or the phone knows a lot more about us than we would like. And this poem is called Algorithm. And it comes from looking for houses when my family was thinking of moving. And Zillow likes to use a little phrase where they try to hook you in and they say, people like you like this home. So that's the first line of the poem. Algorithm. People like you like this home. People that work at the post office or a school. People that wake at 5:32 to drive somewhere high and dark to see the planets aligned above the crescent moon. People whose fathers unloaded meat trucks when they were laid off from the railroad in 1983. People whose fathers never came home. People who saw a deer in an abandoned parking lot for the nearby mill. People who have wished death on most other people. People who have wished death for themselves. People who choose a city based on how long the drive will be to their hometown. People who feel like they have no future. People who let their yards get overgrown with apple trees and ivy. People who forget to rake until the next summer, the lot opaque with mosquitoes and lit by fireflies. People whose mothers died suddenly. People who already mourned their living mother's death. People whose dog bit a friend. People who've been told they're too loud. People who've been told they're too quiet. People who still have baby teeth in their 30s. People who are prematurely gray. People who buy each other rotary telephones for Christmas. People who try to make their new house look like all the old houses they lived in. People who have had miscarriages and no children. People who rarely fight. People who bruise their hands against the counter when they do. People who have good sex. People whose accents come and go. People who like the color green. People who spend $100 a month on birdseed. People whose mulberries were ravaged by waxwings. People whose windows get nested by wrens. People whose brothers and fathers hunted rabbits. People who don't want to own a gun. People who dream their spouses must be leaving soon. People whose spouses tell them that's silly. People who are unsure of some things that happen to them. People who like bungalows, 5 acres, a house built before their parents were born. People who watch too much television. People who found live snakes inside their homes. People who hiss at their neighbors' dogs to stop them from barking. People that can play any stringed instrument. People who can almost sing. People who took an axe to a hope chest. People who want to know where they belong. Thank you so much.